Hello everyone. Now, I've had a letter in, and it says this. Dear Benito, I've loved your revision videos this year. One request though, I would love to see one with your face in it. Well, here you are, Mum, just what you wanted. I do like to get you what you want with my videos, so thank you very much. Hope you enjoy it. Now, yes, hello. This is another Benito's Explanation to Revision video. We're doing a bit of biology today, which is why we're outside, and it's a good enough reason. Well, it's not a good reason, it's a good enough excuse. So, yeah, it's the AQA AS syllabus for biology. Now, one of the things I've been getting in Unit 2 is that the plant side of the course is a little bit tricky. I wouldn't necessarily agree with this, actually. I'd say the stuff on tissue fluid, things like that, are a bit more difficult. But anyway, that's good for me, because that means I can explain it to you. So, we're going to start off with a leaf, right? Now, that isn't very good, really. That wasn't a very good example. Oh, here we go. We have a nice hawthorn leaf here. Don't know why I'm showing you this. You know what a leaf is. But anyway, what's a leaf for? Well, a leaf is there for carrying out photosynthesis. It provides a large surface area for photosynthesis because it's very thin, and that means it has a large surface area to volume ratio. There's a lot of area on this for sunlight to be absorbed in those chloroplasts, which is then used to stimulate photosynthesis. But the thing we're mostly going to be talking about today is gas exchange. Excuse me if I keep looking over my shoulder, by the way, because I don't like people watching me. Anyway, gas exchange. Now, this mostly happens on the lower epidermis. Again, a large surface area for gas exchange, obviously, but you also have, the main site of gas exchange is in little pores called stomata, which are mostly found on the lower epidermis where they're more shaded. So that way, oxygen from the atmosphere can diffuse through the stomata along a concentration gradient. There's air spaces in between the palisade leaf cells which keep up that concentration gradient, and CO2 from the cell can diffuse out. But there's one problem with this. These stomata are a great way for oxygen to enter, but then they're also a great way for water to leave, and water loss is a big problem. So luckily, on the edge of the stomata, there's things called guard cells which close when gas exchange isn't happening. For example, in the night, photosynthesis isn't going to be occurring. So those stomata will probably be closed to prevent any water loss. And that's the same in insects, of course. And the spiracles of the insects, they can close the spiracles to prevent water loss. So it's the same kind of idea. But I'm sure the most hardest thing about this topic is, I've got my whiteboard, by the way, I don't know whether I'm going to use it, what was it? Water. The transport of water. And I've got an even better prof this time. Look at this. Now, this is, I think it's cow parsley. But anyway, that's totally irrelevant, really. So we're going to start off at the end, right? Here are the roots. Nice thick root here. I didn't realise. I've just pulled it out of the ground, by the way. I'm sorry. Anyway, if we were to go further down these roots, you'd see things called root hair cells. They're very thin. So once again, increasing the surface area to volume ratio. Now, their water potential, because we're talking about water here, we're mostly going to be talking about water potential. Not a concentration gradient, but we're going to be saying a water potential gradient. Basically the same thing, only with water. Now, these root hair cells are going to be full of minerals, ions, things like that. So that means they're going to have a low water potential. Probably the surrounding soil is going to have a higher water potential. So that means water is going to move through osmosis, diffuse through the root hair cells and into the plant. So that's where that water starts off. Okay, so that's through passive osmosis. Now, when it's in the root hair cell, it has to find a way of getting into the xylem. The xylem is it's basically the veins of the plant, really. They transport water. It's what transports the water all the way up to the leaves. In fact, if you look at the leaf, you can't really see them. Well, you can see the little, what you look like veins. That's the xylem. So, but the mission is to get them into the xylem, because they're not in the xylem yet. So what's going to happen? Well, the water can take two pathways. They're called the Apoplast pathway and the symplastic pathway. Now, the Apoplast pathway, they both rely on different things. Apoplast pathway relies on the cohesive tendency of water. Now, what does that mean? Water is what's known as a polar molecule. This is a bit of chemistry here. I think it's because I do chemistry that you need to understand this, but I mean it helps, right? Oh, how am I going to solve it? Right. Water's a polar molecule. That oxygen is highly electronegative. You've got hydrogen atoms here, and then you've got here. So we've got lone pairs of electrons on the oxygen. They're going to attract hydrogens to form hydrogen bonds. Now, I hope this is right. Like that. So we've got hydrogen bonds here, hydrogen bonds here. They're always 180 degrees. The bond angle between the hydrogen and the oxygen of the other water molecule is always 180 degrees. So we're forming hydrogen bonds. That's a bit of extra information here. So it's these hydrogen bonds which basically makes water liquid, in case you were wondering. I knew you were lying in bed thinking about how water's a liquid. Well, there you go, I've just told you. Okay, so we've got hydrogen bonds. Now, this means that each water molecule can stick to the other because of these hydrogen bonds. There's an attraction between the molecules which allows them to stay together. Now, the Apoplast pathway takes into account this feature. Now, once in the root hair cell, it will go along the cell wall of the cell. So the cell wall, here's a cell. Here's the cell wall, it's made of cellulose. So the Apoplast pathway is going to take this route. And obviously there's going to be cells next to each other, and it's going to go on and on and on. Like that, I don't know. Right? They do say I'm Leonardo da Vinci, but... Right, there you go. So, that's only happening because of the cohesive tendency of water. In fact, you can do little experiments about this to test this idea. So yeah. Now, that is one way. The other way is the symplastic pathway, and that relies on something which is a bit more usual, osmosis. Now, this doesn't go through the cell wall this time. This is going through the cytoplasm of the cell. As water moves into the cytoplasm of the cell, it's going to increase its water potential. That means the water potential of this cell is now going to be higher than the water potential of this cell. So water is going to move from this cell to that cell through osmosis, because remember, osmosis is the movement of water from a higher water potential to a lower water potential through a semi-permeable membrane, and that's basically what we've got here. And that goes on, because as water moves into this cell, that now has a higher water potential than the cell next to it, so the water's going to move into the next cell, and that carries on until it gets into the xylem. Now, that's all fairly simple. Now, water moving the apoplastic way has a bit of a problem, because it's okay going up to the cell wall, up to that final hurdle. Let's say this is the final hurdle. We have something called the Casparian strip. Now, that's a problem, because it prevents water flowing any further. It blocks water. So that means when the water molecules reach the Casparian strip, they can't go any further along the cell wall. They're going to have to be forced into the cytoplasm and carry on the rest of the journey the symplastic way. So then we'll go into the xylem. Now, how does the water go from those cells into the xylem? Well, it's all to do with something called root pressure. And that's to do with another form of transport, active transport. Now, active transport is a movement against the concentration gradient. We're moving from a low concentration to a high concentration. Now, this isn't the concentration of the water, it's the concentration of mineral ions. So let's say, ignore all this, by the way. Right? Here we have a cell, and here we have the xylem. It has a high concentration of mineral ions dissolved in it. It's got a high concentration of them due to active transport. So that's using carrier proteins, using ATP and blah blah blah. Now, due to this active transport, the water potential of the xylem is going to be reduced. So water is going to enter simply passively through osmosis. Can you see me? Right. So it's going to move passively through osmosis. So the water isn't moving through active transport. The active transport of the mineral ions into the xylem is reducing the water potential of the xylem, which causes water to move passively through osmosis. And that's root pressure. Now, it's not very useful in moving water up big plants, such as that hawthorn over there, but it is very useful in herbaceous plants. Maybe grass relies a lot on root pressure. But there's one thing which is probably a bit more important, and it's the cohesion-tension theory. And this relies on transpiration. Now, transpiration is the evaporation of water from the surface of a plant. And this has increased the rate of transpiration has increased due to light, temperature, humidity, air movement. The temperature increases the kinetic energy of water molecules, so they'll bump into each other and leave the plant. Humidity reduces the water potential gradient, because if there's high humidity, that means there's going to be a high water potential in the atmosphere. Therefore, the water potential gradient isn't as high, which means the transpiration rate is reduced. Air movement, there's wind, right? Water normally collects on the lower epidermis of the plant. If there's a big gust of wind, that's going to remove that water. Now, that water that was collected on the lower epidermis of the plant is slightly reducing the water potential gradient, because it's staying there. So the water potential gradient is more or less the same. So water isn't going to be forced to leave as much. Does that make sense? I think I've explained that really badly. But anyway, so if we remove that water, the water potential gradient is going to increase. Remember, we're talking about water on the surface of the leaves, which is just staying there. So that's transpiration. So water's being lost. But it's necessary though, because it's what keeps the movement up the plant. So what we're saying is, the heat, the light, is what's controlling transpiration. That all comes from the sun. So the water movement up a plant is basically all just down to the sun. Why? Right. Well, transpiration is making water evaporate from the plant. And let's go back to our cohesive tendency of water molecules again, shall we? As more water is evaporated from the plant, those water molecules with their hydrogen bonds are going to be sticking to each other. So as more water leaves, that water is going to be carrying more water with it. So more water is going to leave the plant. So it's sort of like, I don't know, how can I make an analogy here? A paperclip chain, right? I mean, it's very weak bond. I mean, if you pull the paperclip chain, you could probably dislocate all the paper clips, right? But it's these tiny little intermolecular forces which cause water to leave through transpiration. Now, this transpiration pull, it's called the transpiration pull, puts the xylem under tension. In fact, it puts it under so much tension that, now what is it? In the night time, the diameter of tree trunks is actually bigger than the diameter of the same tree trunk in the day. Because in the day, the xylem is under so much tension that its diameter is being reduced, so the diameter of the tree trunk is going to be reduced. So, what we're saying here, transpiration pull is causing water to evaporate from the plant. The cohesive tendency of water molecules, the water molecule is going to be pulling water along with it, more water along with it, so more water is going to leave the plant. That puts xylem under tension, therefore cohesion-tension theory. That's basically it, and I've done it in 14 minutes, so crikey. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this now. Well, see ya. I was going to do a bit on water loss in plants, but I don't have as much time now. See ya. Oh, crikey.